You know, there are several great data points, both soft and hard, but perhaps the most important report this month so far has come from the housing starts report. Now, the starts themselves are robust, but the best part of that report was a 6.5% surge in single-family housing starts. That's the highest level in almost a decade. I happen to be a major proponent of traditional family formation being the most important long-term driver of the economy, and there's exhaustive data that backs that up. In fact, on average, they say married men earn more, about $15,000 more per year than their single counterparts, but the benefits are even deeper than that when you talk about the entire family. An Ohio State study, in fact, showed that after 10 years, a married couple, on average, will have a net worth of $43,000, while single folks only $11,000. And as far as the kids, you know, they do so much better. You have less income inequality, lower median income pay, lower labor participation. The children in married households have lower rates of poverty, greater rates of high school graduation. They delay pregnancy until they're married and are much less likely to become involved in crime. Now, the problem, of course, is marriage has fizzled out, and it's brought negative consequences along with it. So if we can reverse that slowdown, particularly in birth rates, well, of course, we need to get marriage up first, and it's going to have to start with young people. Think about this. Back in 1950, the average age of grooms was 22.8 years. Brides were just barely 20 years old. In 2015, those numbers surged up to 29.2 and 27 years old, respectively. Now, I'm not sure how or when we change this, other than some sort of social renaissance. If fashion, though, are like bell-bottom jeans, you know, cyclical, then maybe they'll be cool again. Maybe the notion of marriage and children will come back in vogue. I'm not sure, but I think it's got to happen. Joining me now to discuss, Kirsten Haglund and Peter Morici. Peter, you're hanging out with those kids at the university. Tell them to get married and have a family.
You want to get me fired? The reality is that with the advent of career women, there's this desire to get established and to have a career and so forth. But, you know, there's nothing that drives prosperity like people getting married and having children. Because when you have children, you simply try harder because you have to educate them and provide for them. And you also worry about their future. Likewise, when two people are married and they're working together, they just make better decisions, and the children profit from those decisions. You know, there's so many ways in which marriage, you know, works. But, you know, nothing creates an economic boom like a baby boom, because people run out and they buy cribs and bathinettes and all the rest. And that would solve our aggregate demand problem pretty easily.
Yeah.
You know, if the birth rate, if people started aiming at having 3 children instead of 2, we'd have a much larger middle class, we'd have a much better educated labor force, and Lord knows this economy would be ripping at 3 or 4%. Forget about all that budget stuff. If everybody had 3 kids instead of 2, this economy would take off.
You know, Kirsten, I love when Peter talked about working harder. When I became a broker, if it wasn't for my daughter, I would never have made it. I'm telling you. Cold calling people and them slamming the phone on me, the only thing that kept me going was my daughter.
Motivation.
I was like, my name is Charles Kagan.
Right.
My name is Kagan. Hi, Kagan.
Yeah, it's so true. It's absolutely true. And, you know, I'm so glad that you're talking about this topic. And, you know, myself as a millennial, I got married at a young age for a millennial, 23, turning 24 years old. And marriage has been so incredible from both myself and my husband. And you learn and you grow and you build a life together. I'm actually optimistic about millennials, and here's why. So millennials are waiting longer to have children than generations before them, right? Because they are putting financial security. They're making that a real priority. But when you ask them if they view marriage as a positive, as something good for their life, do they want to have children? The answer to all that is yes. So they are traditional. They're just waiting longer. So I am optimistic about the future in this respect.
Peter Park, you're missing that. If they get married, they'll make that happen. It will drive them toward that financial success. You know,
yeah, they're gun shy. They're gun shy. And also, here's another element. Millennials now grew up with the largest portion of parents who were divorced, right? So they grew up with broken families. They say, I don't want that to happen again for my children. So in that respect, I think they're making a wise decision. But you're right. That's why people like me can stand here and go, no, marriage is amazing. It's wonderful. It's better than being single. And, of course, there's economic benefits as well.
Of course, Peter, a lot of these millennials have seen 2 stock market crashes and a real estate debacle.
Well, there's that, but also they carry a lot of debt from school. The high cost of higher education is doing 2 things. It's discouraging people from having babies because of the sheer cost of educating them. You know, I think of the $300,000 I spent to send my son to law school alone. And also, because the kids emerge with debt, because the parents can't pay for it all these days, they postpone buying homes and having children until they work down that debt. That's a real problem. If you want to get at the marriage issue, you have to start to go after some of the economic forces weighing on families.
Right.
And one of those is the high cost of higher education and what government regulation does to that. We need to bring that down so that people can afford more children.
Right. And the other thing, Charles, that's so important about this is young people also see the benefit of having a work-life balance, right? So I think what you're going to see is a shift in the economy is say, yes, I want a family, and I want it on my terms, meaning companies are going to have to adjust to that. And as you see millennials in more leadership positions, you'll see that having a family becomes more of a way that they can really have a more fulfilling life and not just be a slave to their job.
Maybe it could come back and
if you keep everything long enough, it comes back around and in style.
Hope you have a great weekend.
Thanks.
And you wore your green. I've got green cufflinks. Peter, St. Patrick's Day comes back next year. Catch you then.